All right, good afternoon. How's everybody doing this afternoon? We got to be better now. Come on. There we go. Thank you. All right, that's what we need. A little energy in the room this afternoon. Well, first off, just like to thank all the regular people. Ronnie, thank you for putting this on. And then Sheriff, thank you and your team for being here. And the hospital team as well. Thank you very much. What that shows, definitely, as you showed in your slide, Carson City is a community. And we'll see later. There's some themes definitely going on here today. I think one thing that struck me that the sheriff talked about, and I think the ladies from the hospital, Sheriff talked about as well, is that we don't always see the cause of what we're talking about, right? There's a lot of background information, there's a lot of data back there, and we typically see the tip of the iceberg and tend to react on that. So I like the idea of the training, give pause. That's what I have learned is mindfulness. So kind of think about things for a second, take that deep breath. A couple of other things that I did notice too is that what I would call getting involved left of the timeline, or left on the timeline, right? Rather than having to react when something is going on, we've gotten together in environments like this, we've talked to community members, we've talked to other friends, business owners, and we thought about what can we do better. And we've got out in front of some of these things, and these plans have been put into place so that when these crises do get worse, we actually have the foundation, as was mentioned, not only in Carson City, but help some of our other rural jurisdictions, maybe even Fallon, in those areas out there as well. A couple keywords that I see, partnerships and community, multiple times already mentioned today. None of us get anywhere without those of us that are around each other, right? So whether it's our business partners, our family members, our coworkers, whatever it might be, we definitely need those partnerships and those community involvement. And then lastly, before I get into mine things, is the holistic approach, and as well as the innovation that's been mentioned. So a lot of themes going on today. So I do have my panel up here, our panel. Real quick, we have John Krmpotic from KLS Design Group, Christine Hess, CFO for the Nevada Housing Division, sorry. And then I have Dannett from a couple different places. She is the director currently for the Apartment Association for the state of Nevada. And then down on the end, Ms. Welty, who also works for NG Properties as a regional property manager. So we have a good spread. Before I get to talk to the panel, I just want to kind of go through a few things real quick. We got to that part. So how did I get here? So I go back to Carson City in 1977. That's when my parents decided Carson City was the community they wanted to move to. So I am a Carson Junior High and Carson High School graduate. I do have a bachelor's and a master's from the University of Nevada, Reno as well. That took me a little while longer to get back home though. As you'll see up there, the Air Force symbol, I left Carson High not knowing what I was going to do in life, joined the Air Force. Dabbled a little bit in Texas and Mississippi as well as North Dakota before realizing, you know what, Carson City is a pretty good place to come back to. So I came back here, finished my degree at UNR, like I said, got involved in the construction industry, did a bunch of stuff throughout the years. In 2009 when the recession hit, talked about resiliency and everything else, what do you do with new challenges in life? I had kept my military career open being a Guard member, and I became a full-time Guard member. So that overlapped with some time last couple of years as the city manager in Live Oak, Texas. We like to say that San Antonio was our southwest suburb. Live Oak was a neat little town of 18,000 people in the San Antonio metro area. Fantastic place to work. As you'll see up there, we had some values for Team Live Oak and everything else. It was really, really neat place to be. Just last fall, I had the opportunity to return to Carson City. The Builders Alliance, obviously I still know a lot of people from the area. They asked me, hey, we're looking for a new CEO. Would you like to come back to the area and help us move the Alliance forward? So I thought that was a great opportunity. So my wife and I are now back in Carson City. So we're talking about sound bites today. We touched on, I think, a little bit earlier too, when you saw them talking about what kids do with the phones today. A typical sound bite is maybe, if you're on TV and show you, stuff that. 8 to 10 seconds, I believe. 8 seconds on a soundbite, 10 to 15 words if you're looking at a written soundbite. You just heard over an hour and a half of good discussion about the challenges facing our mental health crisis in our community. How do you ever expect to summarize that and make a decision based on 10 to 15 words and maybe 8 seconds of information? That doesn't work. So talking with Ronnie, I think sound bites is a good start. So how do we get to analyzing things? Like I talked about earlier, I appreciate what we talked about with the sheriff, with his training for his team. Learning to de-escalate, learning to slow down. So what Ronnie asked about, and what I'd like to talk about today a little bit, is critical thinking. So you see in that picture, we got a lot of puzzle pieces going into our heads, right? That's everything you've ever experienced in your life. From when you're a child, to when you were in school, to your family, to your friends, to your business. Everything, good, bad, otherwise, is all in your brain, all getting shuffled around, trying to figure out what's going on with life. That's a lot of stuff. Again, coming back to the soundbite, how do you summarize that into those little bits? I don't think summarizing it works. So what I'd like to talk about a little bit today is how you maybe do a little bit of critical thinking, like you're doing hopefully today. Thinking about what you're hearing, thinking about what you know, thinking about how you might be able to help improve some of these situations. So when I look at it, I always say it's all about Nevada. For me, it's one Nevada. So I like what I heard earlier about Carson City being the community. Then we talked about Carson City being a part of a larger region. Well, then I take it one step further. If our community is successful and our region is successful, then our state is successful. So I always look to it being one Nevada, whether that's here like we're talking about today with the mental health crisis, the housing opportunities, or even the education later on, but also some of the bigger things that are going on economic-wise in the state of Nevada. So when I look at it, what's the first thing for me when I look at if I'm going to be trying to critically think about something? First thing is we all have to look and understand we bring biases to the table, right? Like I said earlier, everything you have done in your life has set you where you are. You have your belief system. It's fine. It's not bad. It's not good. It's just yours. Everybody in this room has a different one. But that first step about critically thinking is understanding that's yours, right? That's your bias. That's your background, not everybody else's. So when you're going to start thinking about stuff, that's kind of the first thing I go, okay, I'm bringing some stuff to the table that's probably clouding my vision a little bit. I want to make sure I'm thinking about that. Secondly is inference. So when you're thinking about this is, how do I make a decision? I'm going to talk next about research to get to that. But when you have the information in front of you, how are you able to make that next step to make a decision to begin taking action on whatever that might be? And I like the idea that I was talking about earlier, slowing that down. Again, that's what I learned about mindfulness. My thing is when I talk about how you get to a solution, I think if you bundle it up with some stuff that was talked about earlier, I think there's 9 or 12 boxes up on the hospital's picture there, right? You have to get something moving. If we sit around and just talk about it all day, nothing will get done. But if we start something moving, we make a decision and step off, we're making progress, and then it just gets easier from there. And if we need to change direction, it's even easier because we have momentum and we're moving forward. But how do we get to that good decision? We have to do some research. Remember that soundbite. How many of you have a news app on your phone, or you look at your Facebook, your Instagram posts, or whatever all those are, right? Every single one of those algorithms is designed to feed you the same thing you look at. There's no counterpoint in there. So you think the whole world thinks like you. That's what I do, right? I click on my phone. Wow, look at that. All the news, just like I think. That doesn't work. So when you're researching, go to a different news app. Talk to some different people. Go to a different meeting. Come to something like this where you hear some different viewpoints and take that into your thought process so that at the end of the day, when you go to make that decision under the inference line and step off, it's a better decision because you've taken that time and you've done some more research.
Thank you.
Next is identifying the problem. Part of the problem with the soundbite is whoever made that soundbite is what they picked out of that as being the most important out of that statement or that presentation. It may not be the problem, but all of a sudden it is because that snippet has been on how many news clips, has been posted on how many Facebook sites, or whatever else the case may be. So before you step off, try to identify the core problem. Again, coming about through research. Next is your curiosity. How many of us know exactly what we know and we're good with it, and we go through life every day because we're busy. All I ask is when you're in a situation like we're talking about today with everything we're talking about, be a little curious. Set some of those things aside. Have what some might call that beginner's mindset. Whatever you're talking about. I haven't thought about it that way before. I haven't seen that before. Ask yourself those kind of questions when you're in this environment. And again, that gives you better data and better information that you can make a better decision on to move off on a solution. And then lastly is the relevance of that information. You can still have information, but you still have some judgment to make. As I said earlier, some of those snippet producers don't necessarily have your best interest in mind. They have their own agenda. So whatever they're trying to accomplish is what they're trying to promote. It might be more clicks. It might be a pay raise if they, if they're living on YouTube and they get by clicks. It might be if they're on 30 Days Feelings, if they're a news reporter or somebody else like that, a magazine writer, maybe they're looking to get a larger crowd. So make sure that it's relevant for what you're thinking about. All right, so now we got, as Lonnie said, the elephant in the room for today. So the elephant in the room today for us is housing. I'm going to talk about a little bit in Carson City. I just wrote some quick numbers down. Ronnie gave you a good little yellow, the yellow copies in there have some good things. Right on top, if you notice, 18% of the property owners in Carson City pay the property tax. It gives us everything we love to do, including some of the creativity you heard about earlier. 18%. That's a challenge right there. In fact, I think it was mentioned 144 acres, 18%. That shrinks it down even further. Those folks are paying the money to give us all what we enjoy, right? Why I moved back to Carson City. That's a challenge to start off with. Inflation. We've all heard inflation. So just some quick numbers again. Since 2020, overall inflation is up 19%. Food is up 25%. Energy is up 26%. Shelter services, of which we're going to talk a little bit about housing, some of that is included in that, is up 21%. So when we talk about costs going up, that's real, right? We all feel that. Everybody in this room has felt that. You might feel a little bit differently. If you're on a fixed income, you might feel it stronger than some others, but it's real when you look at that. I think everybody that drives down Main Street, or you'll see the Maverick sign or the Sinclair sign off of 580 there, you know what gas has been doing the last couple of weeks. Mirrors down there, you got that. It's pretty crazy what's going on. Just this year, from the construction standpoint, as of the other day, government's anticipating 3 to 6% increase in construction costs this year. Overall, Carson City, and this is in the information that Lonnie gave you as well, Carson City is seeing a 17% increase year over year in pricing and housing, with sold numbers up and time on market down. Now that's good if you're selling a house, right? That's good if you're living in Carson City and you're part of the community, because that means there's activity. That means people want to move here. But what that also means on the other side is that the median price for a house from 2012 to 2023 has almost tripled, from $125,000 to $460,000. That's a big change. And when you look at that, the wages in Carson City have only increased 10%. That's good, everybody got some raises, but only 10%. Now that's in the last 3 years, 20 to 22, for preach. But still, 10% doesn't cover the housing costs. Inflation, just to break it down a little bit, inflation was 7% in 21, 6.5% in 22, and last year, 3%. Anybody reading the news saw that the Fed is expecting it to stay around that 3% this year, and now they're talking about rates not adjusting potentially this year as they thought even just a few months ago. So when you look at all of those things, it's kind of easy to understand why costs are going up pretty much everywhere. Everything we touch is going up. Look at fast food. I think everybody sees that in the news a lot, right? What was it? McDonald's Happy Meal was $12, and I don't think you can get a Big Mac for anything just by itself for $12. up to anymore. I think that's a little newsworthy out there. Those are all the effects of what inflation has done. So with that, I would like to get to the panel this afternoon here to discuss some of what we might be doing, some of what they might be doing to help alleviate or educate, and some of the things they see going on in the field of housing in our community. So I'd just like to start and I'll just go down the table kind of back and forth, give everybody a chance to chat. Can you give the audience some examples of techniques, channels, or programs you use to ensure distribution of accurate information in today's communication challenged environment that we talked about, sound bites, and all the other stuff? So I'll just start close. John, would you like to take that one first? Microphone right there.
Didn't realize this was going to be so scripted. Can you hear me now? Examples of techniques, channels, programs that you use to ensure distribution of accurate information. It sounds more like a media thing. Excuse me? Can you hear me now? Better? Okay. Just so you guys know, when I was tapped to be part of this, Glen asked me, we have a nice relationship, I'm involved on the board, his board, and I said, I'm not an affordable housing guy, but I know a lot about influencing the cost of housing. I do it on every single family project. So I don't really have a perspective on this first question, but and we'll get into more of the meat and potatoes on what I do. What I wanted to be adamant about in my participation here is to let you guys know that every single project I work on, every single one of them, has an issue with affordability at some level. And there's so much that goes into it. And so I said, yes, I think I can bring something to the table, something to the discussion to talk about. Glen just said it, I forgot the numbers that he put out, but staggering numbers from 2012 to current year, last year, about the average cost of housing. And I said, here's what I know when I started in this business 25 years ago, and that really involves the process of from land acquisition, design, the land entitlement through the regulatory process, and a lot of government affairs in between, which is called lobbying. It has become profoundly at all levels, at all jurisdictions, I should say, not levels, because I'm primarily focused on local government jurisdictions, planning commissions, boards of supervisors, county commissions, city councils, etc. And it's just staggering to me in 25 years how much has changed. So that's my opener. I'll hand it off to Christine.
Just real quick, if I could, yeah. Christine, one thing when we talked earlier, John, you mentioned part of the communication is definitions. And yes, a lot of your projects have been very creative in trying to address some of the things. I think one of the things we've seen is definitions make a difference. And some people might throw out affordable, some people might throw out workforce housing, other terms that can muddy the water potentially. So part of your challenge, I would imagine, is making sure that we're all starting on the same page and trying to understand the definitions.
And pretty much every housing deal that you see, regardless of where it is in the market, says we have this affordability component. And it's no more than a word. That's really what's going on out there. And that's where we kind of connected on this topic of somehow influencing the cost of housing at all levels. And I remember a couple years ago, a client, he's building $700,000 houses, and he went up to the podium at Planning Commission and said, we're an affordable housing developer. And I said, if you say that again publicly, I'm resigning, because it's anything but affordable housing. But you do hear it so much overstated, and I feel like there's got to be some integrity in the definition of that. Thank you.
Christine.
Great, well, thank you so much. So I work for the state. So, and in the space of housing, it's a hot topic. Thank you so much, Ronnie, for hosting this, and for everyone for being here, and for Glen and the rest of the panelists. To your first point, techniques when you're thinking about disseminating accurate information. In my space and in my previous role, where I did a lot of advocacy work, I just know that everything is a soundbite, right? And so I really prepare and also intentionally try to make sure that when I'm being asked a question, especially in a public setting, that the ideas that I'm trying to get across, that they are understandable and relatable to the audience. So I think that's really important. And then similarly, how when I'm trying to follow up, I loved those pointers you gave about going to other news channels. When I'm reading, I love to actually go and check the source, right? And I love to follow up, and I don't know, on the internet, you can click there, then you click here, and I like to just further read more about the organization that was behind the source, their methodology. So, those are some of the ways. But yeah, when it comes to the word affordable, so I can actually tell you, working for the state, that there's actually a statutory definition. So that's one way to define it, but it's very difficult in housing, because ultimately affordable for me and for you, right, is going to feel different. And so it's a word that really muddies the water, no doubt, and it's always a challenge.
Thank you. Dannett.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? My name is Dannett Michelin. I work with the CoStar Group and specifically apartments.com, and also as a board director for the Nevada State Apartment Association. So as far as the Apartment Association goes, as far as communication, we have a communications team that responds to news organizations that put out information. We try to provide speakers, representatives to our local news outlets to get correct information out to the community. We're 180,000 units in the state strong. So there is a lot of information, and like everyone else here said, you have to consider the source. And not necessarily that the source that's reporting to you is wrong. It might be that they're looking at one certain area and not expanding it. Like if we're talking about vacancy rates, how are they counting that vacancy rate? Or what are they looking at? What are they counting? If they're only counting 105 communities in the area and there's 300 communities and they're not counting those other ones, and we don't have an accurate number. So they are accurate for what they're counting, but you need to look at what they are looking at. So it doesn't mean that they're telling an untruth. They may not have all the information.
Glen, can I just also let everybody know, because she's amazing. The report that you have in your folders is from Betsy Fadali, who is on contract with the Nevada Housing Division now, but she's the retired economist. But again, to Danette's point, right, from my perspective, I know where Betsy's getting this information that she's provided to you. We have the data, we store it, it's primary data, we call these properties, right? But I just want to give a shout out to Betsy, because she's amazing and really a resource, right? When I get records requests, I call Betsy or the new economist when that person comes, so I can be sure to deliver the proper information.
Hi everyone, I'm Coleman Welty. So I'm an operator in the area, meaning that we own and operate apartments throughout northern Nevada. I think I'm on this panel today to also give a local perspective. I live in Carson City, I'm from this area, I've managed properties in this area, and so this panel is really great because you have a stick-built housing side, you have an apartment side. There's going to be a lot of great information that comes. On this specific topic about information getting disseminated out, I think that there's a ton of information out there, right? It's just understanding the right sources to get that information, and it's really going to be driven by you on what side of the fence you want to be on. If you're looking for housing information, go to the Association of Realtors to get that information. Go to reputable sites such as that. For apartment information, there's a lot of different marketing sources. CoStar provides a ton of reports and a lot of information. Even Zillow and other ones like that will provide information, reporting. So social media specifically, we all have Facebook. More and more this social media thing is here and it's real. You're able to follow those sites that provide true, accurate information. And I always recommend following a few different ones and then read through all the material and make the decisions yourself. Our very wise moderator, Glen, said that the conclusions that you come to are your own from your own experiences. So try to cast a wide net, try to really find those reputable sources that you feel that you trust, and then pull the information that you need from there.
Great. Thanks, Glen. I want to follow up. John mentioned that, some of this is a media exercise, and I agree with that. And John deals with that. I think Christine, too, in her previous life, as the Nevada nonprofit, Nevada Housing Coalition founder as well. And then probably on the apartment side, too, just if you could just touch on a little bit of the accuracy versus the speed, right? As fast as media moves these days, how do you stay on top of ensuring that we get good information out? I just want to stay down that end of the table if you have any techniques or things to look at.
Yeah, I think that you'll know from pricing what is going on in the market right now. You all will see and hear the constant entourage of information coming at you. But when you look at pricing in the area, if you've lived in the area for any period of time, you're going to know what pricing is doing. And it's pretty easy to watch. It's pretty easy to see. There's some new construction in Carson City. Look and see where those are starting at. And then that'll help you decide whether the information you're receiving is legitimate or not. If you're hearing prices are falling, but you're seeing prices in Carson City aren't, then you'll know, maybe somewhere in the nation they're coming down, but you'll really be able to decide locally here what's happening for us just by looking at the local market and the information available.
I think to Coleman's point, sometimes we see national news and it doesn't reflect what's happening locally. So taking into account what you're hearing nationally, look at your local, what's happening locally. It can be completely different.
Yeah, in terms of speed is certainly only let yourself get burned once, right? And ideally you're not burned. But yeah, in my previous life, you were always looking to promote especially the good news. But again, it's from a trusted source and partner typically. And looking, to me, social media is the opportunity to uplift your industry as well and share hopefully across your sectors and your own connections, but other areas that your connections may not have.
I can touch on accuracy of information from my point of view, starting when social media just became a platform of which people come at you against projects. People can say anything, and they do, and they rally the troops, and they fight you, and it can be incredibly effective. I mean, we all get it. Elected officials have to look at who's saying what and how extensive that collective testimony is. And so, from my perspective, that's added another burden, and delaying projects and speed has been bogged down speed as a product of that. And it's really a result of a lot of misinformation, and information can be easily collected now because of social media platforms.
So bounce down to the end of the table to start over Coleman. So on the next question, as it relates to your business, we already touched on a few, but are there one or two main areas of critical interest to you that you see constantly maybe being misrepresented or maybe not accurate information being out there due to the soundbite, as we call it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've all heard it, right? Property managers are slumlords, right? They're only interested in money. That's all they want. Is that true to a very small extent? Probably. There are definitely bad owners out there that do a bad job. But I want to, from the inside out, let you know that most owners do care about their residents, about prospective residents. We want to ensure that there's satisfaction with our residents. It boosts resident retention. We don't want to push residents out or make things bad or unlivable. Really, the goal is to provide you with the best place to live at a price that makes sense for both parties. And if you have issues with your landlord, if you know of a family member who's having issues, I strongly encourage you, reach out to them, talk to them, explain the issues, and then there are advocacy groups throughout the state of Nevada that can help resolve those problems. I don't like bad owners either. They give us all a bad name. Most respectable property management companies in the area do want to provide a good service to our residents.
Basically a lot of what Coleman said, but I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that rental housing operators can't wait to evict. You hear that all the time, like someone wants to raise your rent or whatever, and they want to evict. They're not in the business to evict. They're in the business to rent their units for their homes. A lot of misconception is that they're all big corporations. That's not true either. There's plenty of those, but there's lots of mom and pop, small people with regular jobs that also have some rental units. They're not all rich. Some of them are, but not all of them are rich and can handle no rent for a few months. They, what's the other thing? Let's see. They contribute tons of jobs. Like I think in Nevada we're at like 33.6 billion annually in revenue, and 141,000 jobs are created by the apartment industry and supplier partners.
Yeah, in my space, it's the stigma around affordable housing and the people who live in them, right? If you grew up like me, you might have had some movies and you're like, oh, the projects, public housing, and I saw a movie once, right? I guarantee you are all driving past affordable housing properties every day, and they are some of the most gorgeous properties with some of the most top-notch energy efficiencies, amenities, and you can't tell the income from the outside. And there could be residents in here, they're among us, they're in our workforce. So I think for me, the battle is really around the stigma of the word affordable housing. And frankly, I don't care what you call it, people just need housing. If it makes everybody more comfortable to call it workforce housing, I'll call it workforce housing. If you want to call it attainable, I'll call it attainable. But ultimately, affordable housing is just a place where somebody can live stably.
Okay, Christine, just follow up on that. One of the things we had talked about in our Zoom call, and also is in your report, is speaking of affordable for Carson City. If I remember the numbers right, the government defines affordable as 30% of the household income. And I think if I did my numbers right in the report, Carson City is at 36% when you look at their median compared to the income. Can you just give a little bit more information out of your report? Maybe give some of the folks maybe a page or two to highlight from there that they can get to quickly?
Yeah, I'll have to pull the report. Betsy gave me cheat sheet slides. She's so amazing. To pull the report and get the pages. I'll do that as I move to John. But essentially in the space of affordable housing, so I'm going to now switch hats and I'm going to talk about affordable housing that has subsidies in it. So it's subsidized housing. I'm going to talk about housing that has income restrictions, rent restrictions, right? It's not market rate housing, and it has those restrictions for at least 30 years in Nevada. So they are limited in what they can raise their rents. So it's a little bit of a different conversation, but the household income plays a big part, because basically to qualify to live in these units, you have to meet HUD's definition of a certain income limit. So Betsy, I have in front of me a table, and just to give you an example of what that means, in Carson City in 2024, this is based on information that came out from HUD for 2024, low income is defined as 50 to 80% of area median income. Okay, let's put that into like real words. So if you're a single person in a home, you would qualify for low-income housing as a low-income tenant if your income is $51,700. That means you can afford rent of $1,295, right? So again, to your point, John, Glen, not paying more than 30% of your income. If you, for example, are very low income, you make 30 to 50% of area median income in Carson City. Again, let's put that into real people terms. Let's discuss it as a family of 3. You're making $41,550. That could be some of our minimum wage workers, right? A couple working together, or even above that. You can afford $1,040, right? Technically, you can afford that. And so when we bring online low-income properties, what we're doing is we're building, first of all, beautiful units that you can't tell from the outside. But now this family has a rent that they can afford. So it's complex. When we talk about battling it, I usually lead with, this is really complex and technical, So, but I like to put some numbers to it.
And that was kind of, thank you, that's what I was going to want to touch on is, community's been mentioned a lot today. Carson City is in the midst, as some of our audience members know, of updating its master plan right now. And a lot of the discussion is around having that community aspect. And I think a lot of people are discussing having that breadth of opportunity in Carson City, right? To support the lifestyle and amenities, enjoy everything that we particularly like here in Carson City. So I appreciate the numbers because I think you're right. When you look at 41,000 for that number, that is some of our entry-level workers. So I think it's important that we have those opportunities for those folks right here in Carson City as well. So thank you. John, anything to add to that?
I'm back to the only note I had: self-affordable has no meaning, right? I'm probably not going to make friends with the public side of affordable housing and all the underwriting that goes with that. And I'd like to, the whole notion of affordable housing, but keep some focus on housing affordability at all levels, because again, you hear Glen's numbers, you hear Christine's numbers. I look at everything that we deal with on the development side. Impact fees go up every single time there's a fee review. It's the way it works. It's inherent in the process. Land value, land availability is a problem. Regulatory process, as I mentioned initially, is a huge challenge. And cost of labor has gone up, cost of construction goes up. Everybody knows this stuff. And now we have average income that does not allow the average person to go buy a market rate home. That's a problem. And at the simplest level, I look at it as Christine pointed out, at $1,300 a month. I see my daughter came back from graduate school, thinks she's got a nice job in Reno, ends up moving back home because she couldn't afford apartment rent. And I just find that remarkable at the simplest anecdotal level of which I experienced and invested in a great deal. It's a problem, and I think we need to look at it on a very broad level and not just the program type of affordability, because I know when I went to Washington, D.C. lobbying on behalf of the Builders Association when I was president in Northern Nevada, there's a lot of affordable housing programs, and I'm not going to suggest here that it takes care of itself. But there are at the federal level, low income housing tax credit, the bonding from the state level, and there's a lot of allocations, and I think there's some masters of syndication that put those deals together. So we need to look at it from my point of view of a much broader scale.
And I think to the soundbite, you mentioned land availability, John. I think a lot of us have heard, federal lands bill, right? Federal lands bill will fix a lot of stuff. Well, first off, the federal lands bill, if you're lucky, I think Carson City is about 8 years into it, if I'm about right. Okay, 6 or 8. Reno Sparks is into one that's being talked about being finalized, but those are 5 to 10 year programs at best, and those go through a lot of processes, right? There's a lot of conditions that are placed on those, and some of that land, and rightly so, is dedicated to open space and other uses, not only to housing, although there is some affordable housing parts that are actually mentioned in the Sparks one as well. So that is another piece of, as land gets rarer and rarer, the land cost goes up as well. So thank you, John. So just keep it on affordable housing. So we mentioned some of it already, but in adding costs to affordable housing, whatever that is in your definition, we talked about inflation, right? Inflation is a big contributor to that. When you look at construction, how many of you have tried to have some work done either at your place of work or at your home, but to get a contractor out is tough these days. Not the world I was used to, 15, 20 years ago. You're probably 3 or 4 weeks out at best. If they return your phone call, some of them do the famous ghosting, right? They won't even return your call. And then some of them, I think they just throw out this number with a comma and a bunch of zeros on the other end just to see if you'll bite. And I don't blame them, right? I mean, that's capitalism. That's the world we live in. But I think one of the things that we look for as the Builders Alliance is making sure that we have that workforce available to support communities such as Carson City and get those folks in so they can expand, not have a debt coming out of college, but then also providing additional folks to maybe help some of this cost come down on that side. But as that relates, we talked about inflation. I think, John, one thing you mentioned a couple of times already is time to approval. That's what I'm calling it. And maybe not everybody here is familiar with that. If you just talk about maybe, not in simple terms, but in complete terms, the cost of the carry and or time of approval and what that can do to a project.
My friend Hope Sullivan's in the room. I'm intimidated now. I just finished a project. I was proud to see that I had my fingerprints on it, and the mayor had it in her presentation a couple of weeks ago. Thank you, Mayor. 40 lot subdivision on Ormsby. And I find it staggering that we closed escrow last week with Toll Brothers is going to be building those 40 homes in Carson, which is a nice addition to Carson City, a bit of a new market entry. But it was 3.5 years ago that we started with acquisition of that property. September of 2020, I think that's still in COVID. And here we are, just now closing to start subdivision improvements. That's no fault of anybody's at City Hall. There's a lot of delay on the developer side. We were pushing density. We had just so many constraints on this piece of property. But all I'm saying is it's another experience of 3.5 years it took to go get a map recorded. It's mind-boggling to me. And I don't know I can't possibly explain it. I have engineers on every one of my teams. And I go, what's going on here? And it's the process, and if you step back and go, you look at this piece of raw land, it's basically in the middle of town or on the outskirts of town, near infrastructure, makes sense for some planning. The density was pretty aggressive at the time. Why 3.5 years? And so to Glen's question and to his point, what does that do? I mean, the carry was extraordinary on the carrying of the land cost and all of the investment and delays that go with that. That's just one experience that's very recent and in this town, and it's going to be a beautiful project. I do think, and Hope and I talk a lot about this. I think, relationships with everybody at the city are so important to influence a little more push in the process because of trust and credibility and good product. And I do think that one was an outlier, but I think, doing really good work generally is going to get you there quicker with the right teams and the right credibility and the right relationships. Thank you.
Christine, anything on that in general, if you really are affected there, if you have anything to add?
Oh, are we affected? I mean, really, along with the private sector, the cost to develop new affordable housing or to rehabilitate existing properties is crazy. I just want to give a shout out to Nevada. We have one of the most robust pipelines in the country. So the commitment of $500 million of our American Rescue Plan Act funds, the state, local, and fiscal recovery funds. So the Housing Division is deploying actually about 20% of the state's funds for housing right now. And without those, we would not have a robust pipeline, period. I can tell you states around the country are looking at us like, at least you have activity. We don't just have activity, we're bursting at the seams. We just had 5 projects approved at Board of Finance this morning. 4 tax-exempt bonds, which generate private equity. All you need to know is, without it, these projects wouldn't happen. But all of these projects had also levels of either some of those American Rescue Plan Act funds to close the gap. They're getting creative, right? So they also had, Clark County has its own community housing fund. A couple of them in December, I know, just got recently some waiver of fees, permitting fees, in order to be feasible, right? So again, with restricted income levels and rents. So we are seeing it. I think it just brings me back to the role of community. But for community, we wouldn't have these projects happening. In Clark County here, I'm sorry, Mayor, there are low-income properties that have these tax exemptions. So if you have certain types of funding in your project, you get a tax exemption. I was part of a closing that almost didn't happen. And actually, it still is questionable Minty, there's something we need to fix. But no, because our tax exemption law and affordable property just wasn't meeting those criteria, the funding sources, you cannot operate an affordable housing property without it. So thank you, Carson City, for granting those exemptions, because while they're in statute, it's not required, right? So it does take community to make these projects happen now. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing, I would be twiddling my thumbs.
We don't want that. Thank you. And I think, again, coming back, community partnerships, right? You know, John mentioned that too. I think that's a key word. You've heard a bunch today. And then again, as a hospital team mentioned, you know, being innovative. I think that definitely fits in this realm as well, right? There are a lot of challenges. Convert those to opportunities. How can we overcome some of this and supply those opportunities? So, Dannett.
Well, we need more housing. In Carson City, I think there's at least 400 units under construction, so that's probably close to 10% increase in supply, and that is needed. If we don't have more, people are moving to Northern Nevada, whether we want them to or not, we have to respond to that. Builders don't build, it's not a, if you build it, they will come, it's the exact opposite. So we need that extra housing to keep the rents stabilized. But there's high cost to building those, as we've already talked about. And I think Coleman can speak to this more than me.
So for who's from Carson City in the room? So all right, we live in Carson City. Can put myself there because it's small, right? Because it's not Reno, and I think for a very long time, Carson City has resisted the growth. It's just from my level of what I've seen. But to Danette's point, they're coming and they're showing up, and now we're running out of housing, and that's really driving costs up. So on the partnership level, I think one, make sure you're partnering with your local politicians to make sure that we are doing business-friendly things that will bring in the types of businesses that we need, and will bring in the housing that we need to help reduce this upward pressure on pricing. Because as long as there's more people coming in than there housing available, then affordability is always going to be challenging. And then also partner with your local brokers, with your local banks, with the community who helps support housing, to ensure that we are making a positive effort that is going to lead towards, again, better housing for all of us, because we need more housing here. And so we have to support those who are going to be able to bring it to us.
Thank you. Okay, so we touched already on partnerships, but if we just kind of focus on that a little bit, and maybe a creative opportunity or so. Christine, you already mentioned one. John, you mentioned, but is there another one? We'll start down on that end of the table again with Coleman, or maybe in one of your properties, something creative to either maintain it or expand it, or whatever it might have been with some of the partners that are involved.
Yeah, I think for us from the apartment side, so property management's really expensive. We all know a lot of these apartment communities are 30, 40 years old, and water intrusions, things like that. There's a lot of items that can happen to a property that can devalue it quickly. And so as operators, for us, we are always looking for partnerships with the community, plumbers, electricians, everybody like that, which helps grow the community as well. We spend a lot every year with our local vendors. We're looking for local companies, not national companies. And so at the end of the conference, if anybody's available, I'd love to share gift card or share business cards and kind of help build the vendor pool with local vendors to help support both you, the community, and then us as managers.
I know a lot of our property managers also partner with nonprofits. They like to be able to refer residents to the help that they need, whether it's food, housing, rental assistance. Property managers a lot of times are therapists a little bit. They're kind of help everyone doing everything. We also, of course, do the partnerships with vendors. And like I said, community outreach. We do a lot of volunteer work with some of those as well to reach those people that need help. We've got all kinds of sponsorships and partnerships.
Yeah, I think I talked about the role of community here in Carson. Services in last session, Assembly Bill 310 provides funding for services to connect people with housing, right? Not just services for services' sake, which is important, but that it's part of a housing solution as well. But I'm actually going to talk about the housing division and the public funds, right? We're limited. And we have private partners that do this and do this well. So one of the things, for example, so I guess I'm on camera, but I don't mind. I'm not perfect. And I don't mind talking about things that I'm working out, right? But we have projects that have even bigger gaps than the division can handle. And right now I'm working to leverage a private sector funding, right, from a community development financial institution, sort of like a bank, but a community-oriented bank. Technical, I can get into that if you want. But anyway, to leverage their funds with mine, to stretch mine further, so that I can now make a bigger $5 million loan, because we don't normally do that in these $70 million projects, right, where it's a small piece of it. But they won't happen. I don't know if it's going to work exactly, because I have to get everybody on board and it changes the structure because of the private sector having different requirements. But I think that's an example where, from a government perspective, I would say the housing division, we don't consider ourselves the end all and want to count on our private sector partners, especially our financial institutions.
John, any other?
A little bit more on partnership. I've always had on the development side this great desire to form the joint venture between the public and the private side. Never done it. I mean, formally, where we're both taking risk. And a couple of years ago, the most notorious property that I can possibly think of in Carson City is the Ormsby House, right? And guess what? I had a client, a deep pocket guy, if I may. He's very humble, doesn't know anything about the physical development, the planning, the execution of a project. He knows how to acquire property, hire the right team, and then go build it and rent it. And I met with Mayor Laurie, I met with Hope Sullivan, and I thought it was really obvious to me at the time that the only way this property is going to go, unless the property owner makes a huge cut on the price of that it's going to have to be formally a partnership between the private and the public. I've never done it formally. I consider my relationships partnership every day, but it's not the same extent where the public side is not taking risk when I'm talking about it. So that's something that interests me, that's going to be key, I think, in going forward on these complex projects.
Thank you. And I think, in my experience, partnerships have always been key. I think, as everybody mentioned too, the relationships in the communities in which you work, right? Getting in early, having those relationships to the left of that timeline, as I talked about earlier, knowing the communities, what their expectations are, right? Whether the technical stuff, what the street standards might be, but a lot of times too, do they need more park space? Are they looking for open space? Are they looking at those kind of things? All of those things add complexity, but they also add a lot of benefit to the community. So from my point of view, I always think partnerships are very important, so thank you. So bringing it back a little bit now to the community side, we heard earlier about the community. Carson City continues to grow. On the technical side, Carson City does have a growth management ordinance in place. They've only hit it once, really, in the last 25 years, I believe, got really close. Other than that, I believe that growth management ordinances has managed Carson City's growth very well. It manages it from the utility side, right? It manages it from the wastewater treatment side as well as the water supply side. So I think that from my perspective, both as a resident back in the day and as an engineer developer in the town years ago, and now my current role, I think that's a good tool that Carson City has used. So John, starting back at this end of the table, from a growth management side, expectation side, are there other things to consider, other tools you've seen that might help Carson City, since that's a community you work today, to continue to be successful?
Yeah, I don't know the to me, there's a fundamental thing we talked about already is land supply, and I'm not sure what's going on with that issue as it relates to this master plan update. But certainly more supply of land, for all types of housing, multifamily, single family, would help to deliver more product and obviously put pressure on pricing. What was the rest of your question?
Is that good enough?
I think I would just add diverse housing types. As we're thinking about planning and things like that, it's the diverse housing types as we consider the various generations, the different people coming to the area. I had a background in economic development, and I've come from a small state and small town. My husband's a Carson, Elko native, by the way. Usually throw that in early. But I think, it's hard to see change and growth, but I always think about the opposite, and none of us want that either. So it's sort of that balance, and I think of housing across the spectrum and having housing available for that. So, but the diverse housing types, not everybody wants what you want or what I want.
100% agree on the diverse housing types. We need all types of housing. Carson City, according to CoStar, is about 95% occupied, which is a pretty healthy number. But that can change if we don't keep going with the building. As more people come in, the rents will go up if we do not have space to put them in. There's a supply and demand, and that's how it works. But we need all types. We need the high-end apartments, we need the affordable communities, we need the houses for people to buy, rent. We have lots of different types of people that live in the community, and we need to cover all of them.
Yeah, not too much to add on that hasn't been said. It's great that we have an ordinance in place to control the growth, but controlling the actual physical bodies that move in, I think, is really challenging. We can control development, control utilities, but people love it here because it's wonderful. And so I think, that's the part to keep an eye on, is to make sure that we're growing fast enough with the body count that's moving to the area.
Yeah, I think a lot of the reason people move in out here, especially during the mass plan update, is the open space. And those of us that have been in Carson City a long time remember that program back in the 90s, getting that in place, the ballot initiative. And I think, again, that's definitely a success story for Carson City as a community, from a health perspective especially, right? The opportunity to get outside and do that. So one of the things that we saw, we mentioned earlier, and Christine referenced, is that 18% property that pays property tax, 18% of the property owners. And those of you that live in the community, that drive around and look, that big property owner is the state government, right? And they're changing, right? The state is changing. The state is moving a lot of their employment to Reno, a lot of their employment down south to Vegas. And they're doing that because they can get employees down there where they can't get them here in our community. So there's going to be some challenges there in how we attract employees going forward to our region, and I think a diversity of housing is definitely one opportunity to get there. But what that's going to challenge us on the other side, as these offices close or they go from a leasing component to an ownership component where the state buys the property, especially if they happen to leave another property vacant and do something else, that's now two properties that are not paying property tax to the city. So one of the things we talked about, or at least I talked about in one of the master plan meetings, was exactly that. How do we be flexible with that from the city standpoint? And I think, John, I'll start with you because you're the land planner. You've done some of this, but you mentioned Ormsby House. When we hear it a lot in Carson City too, what we'll call the old Kmart property on North Carson Street. And then pick a state property either along College Parkway or somewhere along Stewart Street where other opportunities might arise. What might be some of the things, like, I'll just kind of cue a little bit, but mixed use or mixed housing and work components that those areas might lend themselves to?
I'm probably one of the biggest fans, another way to not make friends in this business, but I love to see high density single family. You don't see a lot of it anywhere outside of Los Angeles. But I feel like create the zoning incentive for it, let the market, if it allows somebody to buy a cutesy pie cottage style house on a tiny postage stamp lot, and it works in the market, a lot of times it does, and I'm talking about 12 or 14 to the acre, if that means anything, then go do it. That's the housing side. I really appreciate the creativity that goes into that kind of product design at all levels, and I think it's really good for a city, and it touches on all the diversity of housing that we're talking about here. Everybody can point to Kmart as another example of what's really going on here, but that part of town to me really cries out for some kind of development incentive, maybe a subset of the master plan to really get it going, because there's just too many holes. That's a beautiful part of town. When you're coming down the hill, you come in and you got a lot of open gaps there that should be, in my opinion, big booming tax revenue generating types of land uses and a little more vibrancy there. And I don't know where the south end of it is, but it just doesn't feel right to me, especially with the hospital, major employer there. It's odd to me. So I'm sure that there are a lot of people that are able to give this some thought, but I'd like to see a little more incentive in that area, kind of as a target area.
From my perspective as a state, I mean, that's such a community-driven and locally driven decision and plan and goal. I think the opportunities when it comes to housing that I've seen, whether it's affordable or even market rate, and oftentimes it's market, but they're affordable by nature of the outcome. But is that adaptive reuse, right? Looking at other buildings more creatively, the challenge can be financing that deal. So I think that, could there be a place for the state's housing finance agency, the division? Sometimes, right? But it's also a chance to bring in potentially community development finance institutions, those that'll take a little more risk, or your community bank that is as invested in the community as you all are, as we all are. Pass it to you.
I don't have a lot to add on this question. I'll defer to Coleman.
Yeah, no, same. I mean, as a Carson native, I'd prefer that the state jobs stay in Carson, and talk to your local officials to do that as much as possible.
Thanks. And I think you mentioned the hospital, Christine. I think with the growth they're looking at out there, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I would imagine they're experiencing what I've heard on the other side too, is that trying to attract some of those, talk about diversity of housing, some of those higher level income people. There is a gap as well in Carson City for some of that higher level income housing. So while we've talked a lot about affordable housing here, whatever that definition might be, whether formal or in your own mind again, but then on the other side of that as well, I think from a job creation standpoint, that hurts us, right? Those people aren't here, they're not adding to the lunch income, the weekend income, all those other kind of second and third order effects down the line. And one thing on that, the reason I mentioned the buildings on either Kmart or potentially any state building when it closes, a couple weeks ago I had a chance to be at the grand opening for the GMCC High Tech Center, the Panasonic Trading Center on Plum Lane, Carson City, or in Reno. Anybody familiar with that facility? That, for those of us that have been around for a while, that's the old AT&T building. And back in the day, I had friends that worked there. And you would walk in that building and it was the old school, cubicles, right? You had hundreds of people. I don't know how many, it must have been 300 or 400 people in that whole building. Well, technology moved, jobs moved, everything moved. That building was vacant for quite a while. They turned that and talked about a partnership. So you had Reno, you had the federal government involved, you had Panasonic involved, and you had GMCC involved in that partnership. And I would encourage anyone to go up and take a look at that, because I say you talk about partnerships and examples of what can be done in partnerships. To me, that's just a really current, local, regional example of a success story. And hearing Reno talk about it opening, they're the ones that mentioned it's in a not so good area of Reno, and they're really looking forward to having that training opportunity and those jobs right there in that section of their community to help them grow not only their community, but obviously with the region and then hopefully the state of Nevada. So with that, I want to leave a few minutes for questions. I appreciate the panel and kind of the wide-ranging conversation. Thank you for your time. And if there's any questions out in the audience, more than happy to throw them up to the experts. So let us know. Okay.
So, just want to point out that two of you mentioned the cost of housing relative to one's income. And in the data that you showed, the cost of a median home here in Nevada in the last 4 years has gone up 57%. Of course, one's income in the last 4 years hasn't gone anywhere near that. Whereas housing in Carson City on the apartment side has gone up 26% in that last 4 years. We just saw how the state workers, and not state workers, but teachers were given, I think it was a 14% raise over the next 2 or 3 years. So what we're paying people isn't keeping up with their ability to house themselves. And I would also just point out, 10 years ago, the top 10% of families in the United States owned 50% of all the wealth, and the bottom 50% owned 1%. So wealth inequality in the U.S., capitalism, without wealth redistribution is a real problem.
I have a question for you. Is that right now what I'm not seeing coming into Carson City is I'm seeing luxury apartments or I'm seeing subsidized apartments. That does not actually serve our community. Because our community is primarily, when you look at the government, is our primary employer. And they don't fit in the subsidized, they don't fit in the luxury. So my question is are there any developers that would even consider coming into Carson City and maybe not have granite countertops, not have 1,200 to 1,400 square feet, not have tandem garages, and perhaps an apartment complex that goes back to the original, 750 to 800 square foot footprint that doesn't have all the amenities, because we're looking at Reno that has, in the last 3 years, 15,000 units of apartments in South Reno. And what's happening is our people are using this, the 20 minutes today to South Reno. They're leaving, they're moving to South Reno, they're spending their money in South Reno. And when the state is moving their offices to South Reno because their people can only afford to purchase in Cold Springs, this is a problem here. And we're not talking about working families. We're talking about your vendors that you want, your electricians, your HVAC people. We're also talking about teachers. We're talking about firemen. We're talking about starter homes or an apartment that somebody can actually truly afford. And I mean, this has been really good, but we're talking about two different sizes.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of people in the middle that are not being served. So that's where I'm wondering, where is that? Where is that coming back into Carson?
I don't think anybody up here really has the answer to that.
I'll actually at least provide hope, I hope. It's an active conversation. The housing division, primarily our work is below 60% of area median income, which actually captures our health workers, our teachers, our public safety workers. But in statute, affordable housing is defined up to 120% of area median income. Again, not because other incomes aren't important, but just in terms of what that can look like. But the resources primarily that come through the housing division are federal resources and really targeting 80% or below. And again, primarily the division's at 60%. Those are active conversations that we're having all the time with the governor's office, listening to exactly your comments. How do we get that? And so, the division is exploring what is our role, how can we support the townhomes. I was just on a call that aren't getting built in the rural community because the financing isn't coming. Is there a role for the division? I don't know that answer, but I think the more that you bring that forward and the role more that we can support communities to help incent private builders to build that type of housing is an opportunity. So.
I know those conversations are ongoing with developers as well. I think again, it's the market timing for some of this, and it's all the things we just talked about, right? It's the land availability, it's where the permitting is, it's where the costs are, all of those things. So again, but the solution is in the community, the solution is in the partnerships we talked about. So probably going to identify a gap and just continue to work to try to get there for you.
I think some of the problem is the cost. The larger luxury communities the developers can make that pencil. The tax credit or subsidized programs, they have subsidies to help them. The ones in the middle, if they can't make any money, they can't build those. So that's why we do need all of them, even the luxury and the low income, so that there's more availability in the middle for the apartments that are already there.
Similar question. Okay, so you have affordable housing for home ownership, but my concern is if you have that, the seniors will outbid the workforce. And so I think to do that successfully, you need to make it a first-time homebuyer program. So I'm curious if the state has state programs for home ownership for first-time homebuyers in communities, and if you're partnering with private sector developers so that we can hit that 80 to 120, because we know our affordable developers are getting lower than 80.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and I do oversee both our multifamily and single-family bond programs. Yes, we have a first-time homebuyer program. However, the first-time homebuyer program, and it provides also down payment assistance, 2% and 4% wrapped into the mortgage. I can give you details on that. That one there is limited. It limits the income levels to 80% area median income. It limits purchase price because we're using tax exempt bonds in order to provide that support and mortgages. But for this program, homeowners wouldn't move in. We did launch in January a new program, and we just, I think starting in May, so I could be news to you if you're a realtor out there or a mortgage banker. We are going to be going up to $160,000 household income. So the primary earner and spouse, it wouldn't count other income in the house. That's how the division views household income in its homeownership program. You can be a first-time homebuyer in that, and you also don't have to be. You can wrap in 3% and 5% down payment assistance, and again, going up to the higher income levels, and additionally, the purchase price limit is not an issue anymore, which is really important here in the North. And I've challenged actually my single family team because we are not getting a lot of loans done in the North. And we're getting most of our loans done in the South, and that is because of the price of homes here. So I think there are opportunities when you say to partner with the private sector, absolutely. To me, the opportunity is for businesses to consider helping with closing costs or down payment assistance as part of these mortgages to bring the rates down even more to make it more affordable for their workers, potentially, right? So there's that opportunity. So there's lots of ways, I think, to do it, but we do need to be intentional for the segment of the population that may not have as many resources targeted to it. We have a lot of focus on the low income and extremely low income, although there's also a lot of need there, and it's expensive. And this population, though, that's getting missed, kind of all of us working, right? Although those are also workers. That's why I hate to be, I want to be careful with my words, but yeah, absolutely.
I felt like your answer was focused on mortgage, and what I'm thinking about is a partnership with the actual developer, where the developer commits to a first-time home buyer program, and all sales are to a first-time home buyer, so the subsidy, if you will, or the financial incentive goes to that developer versus that future homeowners.
There are some of those in the region that are doing that, and it is a first-time homebuyer program, and the partnership in a very general, broad sense is that they are committed to that home for a certain period of time. If they sell that home for a period of time, there's a partnership of profit sharing, in my words, with that home after it's been in increase in value. So those are things that are being done in the region, and that's something we can talk about bringing to Carson. It would be a great conversation.
Okay, thank you so much. You all
Thank you.